Hello. I did my presentation on post-traumatic stress disorder, commonly known as PTSD, and it's a disorder that develops, and some people have experienced shocking, scary, or dangerous events in their life, and it resonates with them for the rest of their life. There are a lot of causes of PTSD. Many include like violent attacks, rape, murder, loss. When people go to war, they come back with PTSD because they see a lot of harsh things that they can't really erase from their mind. And this is from the limbic system in the brain that's responsible for memories. Basically, what happens is the limbic system holds on to these memories. So this is essentially a malfunction of the limbic system holding that memory in the front of somebody's brain constantly. So it's, overwhelming thoughts from previous events can create a very unclear thought process for the victim of PTSD, and they may not be able to think as clearly as they would like to about certain things, and they will react differently. So the aftermath of getting PTSD, and, some of the telltale signs that you may have it are triggers, certain noises, sounds, one of your five senses. You're going to have to undergo treatment, go to therapy and things of that such. Many people suffer from flashbacks, or just simply avoid certain scenarios or situations in which they feel uncomfortable or feel as if the event is happening again. So some of the triggers can be any of the five senses can bring back a memory that reminds the person of the event. So some examples can be loud noises. So if somebody was a post-veteran and they heard a bomb, or heard fireworks or something resembling a loud noise, it can remind them of gunshots, and bring them a time maybe where they lost one of their buddies. Certain colors that an attacker wore, maybe they wore a certain color that's not very common, but that day they wore a shirt when they were attacked. Certain smells, common ones are magnesium. When a lot of soldiers smell magnesium, it reminds them of gunpowder. So how these triggers develop. So usually it's initially the trauma hasn't set in right away. Sometimes it takes people a couple months to develop PTSD. Sometimes it's only a couple days. Most of the times it's that it takes a while is because people are in such initial shock of the event that they cannot really process it the way that it's supposed to be processed. So it's not really recognized by the brain as a initial memory. So the part of the brain that controls this is the amygdala in the brain, which is responsible for emotions. And when PTSD is involved, what it does is it just floods the brains with these intense emotions and memories that people can't stop thinking about. So it constantly fixates itself on the event that happened, or maybe it was an event that happened multiple times. So you constantly think about those events that happened or how you felt during that attack. And unfortunately, when this happens, the body just completely shuts down and goes into fight or flight response and cannot really process it as a real threat or a non-threat to the body. So the body is malfunctioning with its reactions. Some telltale signs that you do have PTSD, which a lot of the times it is very hard to diagnose somebody with PTSD and tell that they have it, because it is not like Hollywood. It is very silent, and a lot of people don't have outbursts or the common things that we see in movies. It's very much inside of them. So some things to look for, somebody might be struggling, or you suspect somebody has it, are avoidance of certain areas, people, or events. People can avoid going to like birthday parties, or avoid going to Christmas or certain holidays where an event happened that was traumatizing to them. Therefore, they avoid it completely. Another thing is that they could really have very vivid nightmares and flashbacks of the event. Be dazing off constantly, not really engaged in conversation a lot of the time because they are thinking about the event instead of focusing on other things. Which leads us into the next thing is that they have trouble sleeping. A lot of people suffer from insomnia. They have trouble focusing on certain things and certain tasks because it constantly brings them back to their state of fear. Some people have violent outbursts and find themselves very easily irritated with, it may be certain people, just because they are constantly on edge and in fear that something is going to happen to them, that they will be attacked. But once again, it's very hard to diagnose and tell that somebody has PTSD. So if somebody is diagnosed with PTSD, which a lot of people go to a doctor to be diagnosed when they have certain symptoms like that, the next step is the treatment process, obviously. A lot of people suggest group meetings. Antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication are very common and usually will be prescribed to the person. Cognitive processing therapy, so this is a very popular technique as well, in which people take, therapists and doctors will take the memory and try to make people think differently about the memory, so it may not be a fear factor type thing for them. It may actually be a lot easier for them to cope with their feelings and emotions as soon as they think about the memory again. The VA is also a great resource. They usually have group meetings, and they also host a lot of cognitive processing therapy techniques for soldiers that come back with PTSD. And yeah, this therapy just helps program the mind to think differently and in a more constructive way about the event that happened in that person's life. So flashbacks, one of the more common things is, this was one of the triggers, people feel as if the event is happening again. Many cannot distinguish between reality and the flashbacks, and they're very vivid and intense. So as much as it is difficult to diagnose somebody with PTSD, there are methods of prevention for when an incident occurs. For example, if somebody suffered from a rape attack, it's always good to try to seek counseling or a social worker so they can kind of help you cope through it before your mind has time to process it. It's better to get you help as soon as possible after a traumatic event happens. Obviously, having a good family and friend support group to talk about these things with is also very good. Meditation, exercise, and practicing self-care are also very crucial to help people have a healthier mind when going into these things. So the statistics for this are around 8 million people each year in the U.S. have PTSD. It's more common in women, and many believe that's because women are more emotional with things, and they tend to think more with emotions, so it's harder for them to kind of look past a lot of their traumatic events. And it's a statistic also that 1 in 13 people will get PTSD each year. So quality resources to reach out to if you suspect a loved one or yourself is suffering from PTSD. There's Military One Source, the National Center for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder, PTSD United, and the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I have a couple stories. This is Jared's story. He was a veteran that served in Afghanistan, and he watched his friend get murdered while he was out on deployment. Unfortunately, when he came back a couple months later, he had a family and everything, but he started noticing some changes in himself, like having violent outbursts after he came back. He had bad memories, flashbacks, and nightmares, all telltale signs of PTSD. And this caused the repercussion of having him have to get a job that isolated him from others in order to avoid conflict, because he became very agitated with a lot of people. So he became a plumber because it was less people to work around. And, unfortunately, he did not recover the way that we expect people to when they seek therapy. This is actually, Mike is a friend of my boyfriend's in the Marines. And this is one of his friends. He saw a bomb kill people when he was on deployment in Iraq, and he didn't know he had PTSD until a couple months after he got back. When he realized, so something wasn't right, he couldn't get the thoughts out of his head about what happened. He was very violent. He watched children and families all get blown up, and it was very sad and traumatizing for him. So months after he was done with the Army, certain smells, such as I mentioned earlier, the magnesium, reminded him of gunpowder. Noises and sights would trigger the memory, so loud noises were very, detrimental to him, because it just reminded him of that attack. So when he was exposed to those triggers, he would tend to try to hide from it, seek cover when he heard loud noises. But eventually he ended up reaching out to the VA group meetings, and he's been in recovery ever since, and he's been doing a lot better since it. It's been a few years now since he was deployed, so he's been doing a lot better. But unfortunately, this isn't the case for everyone, so it's important to get help when you need it. And thank you so much.